All drugs have two types of dependency, okay, whether it's alcohol or the other drugs that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. They all have the psychological dependency. That's the little voice in the back of your mind that says, I need this to feel good, I need this to have fun, I need this for whatever. And then most of them have a physical dependency. In order to be physically dependent on any drug, you have to have it in your system 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for a long enough period of time for your body to adjust and think that the substance belongs there. Probably the fastest group of drugs, unfortunately, to develop a physical dependency on are the opioids and the opiates, which are your pain medication. Alcohol withdrawal is the most dangerous form of drug withdrawal out there. People die from alcohol withdrawal, okay? Alcohol withdrawal comes in stages. The first stage is tremulousness, all the way from a mild hand tremor to shaking so bad you can't even pick up a cup of coffee or a drink for that matter. The second stage is convulsions, seizures, epileptic type seizures. The third stage is you spike a temp, and the fourth stage is the actual delirium. You will have patients, I have patients come in and I ask them if they've ever had serious withdrawal, and they'll tell me, yeah, I had DTs 7 or 8 times. Well, no. You know, shaking like this is not DTs. DTs is the end stage of withdrawal from alcohol. And somebody that's in delirium tremens is out to lunch. They're awake, they're fidgeting, they're talking, but they have no idea of what's going on around them. And 1 out of 5 people that go into DTs will die, usually because of the stress it puts on the heart and the heart blows. Alcohol withdrawal, if you catch it early enough, is a relatively easy medical procedure. You substitute usually the benzodiazepines, Ativan or Valium, and you slowly withdraw that over a period of 3 to 4 days, and that'll take care of the withdrawal. Once a person goes into full-blown DTs, there is no way to bring it to an end. The only thing you can do is try and sedate the patient and make them as comfortable as possible. So, alcohol is the most dangerous form of withdrawal. But remember, with any drug, in order to develop the physical dependency, you have to have it in your system 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for a long enough period of time for the body to adjust. The everyday worker that gets off at 5 o'clock and goes down to the tavern and pounds down 16 or 18 beers until 2 o'clock and go home and passes out and doesn't drink till 5 o'clock next day, it will never become physically dependent, because the alcohol will be metabolized out of his system before 5 o'clock the next day comes around. So, that's unfortunately not true with some of the other drugs, and I'll address that as we discuss about those drugs. Alcohol recovery, whenever anybody talks about recovery from substance abuse, you first have to ask them to define what their idea of recovery is. You have places, some of these private treatment centers that advertise down in the Bahamas and the Keys and that, will advertise 80 to 90% recovery rate. No, their definition of recovery must mean the people that spend all their money and spend 30 days with us and don't drink while they're here, you know. Probably in terms of full recovery, maybe somewhere between 25 and 35%. Now, there are people that will stop drinking for a period of time, usually people who have physical complications, and allow the physical complications to get better, and then start drinking again. And again, it takes time to build up to where they were before. So there is some improvement in their ability to function, but this is not full recovery, okay? In order to recover from any type of substance abuse, people have to, number one, accept the fact that they do have a problem, and number two, develop a plan to keep themselves busy and keep themselves away from the substance. Again, if you have a client that's drinking too much, the number one symptom to look with anybody with any type of alcohol or drug abuse is erratic behavior. Behavior that is different from what that person usually exhibits. Periods of confusion, stomach upset. A lot of alcoholics will develop stomach upset. And of course, the obvious symptoms are a tremor, seizures. If somebody has a seizure disorder and they're developing a drinking problem, their seizures will become more frequent. Usually, if you work with anybody any period of time and you are able to establish any type of a therapeutic relationship with them, they will become more likely to tell you if they relapse or if they screw up and have a drink or use. But you have to establish the therapeutic relationship first. It's a trust issue. I only see outpatients. We do not have any inpatient treatment at the hospital other than detox. Most of my clients, most of the alcohol clients will be fairly open about talking about if they screw up and have a drink or not. The drug clients are a little different. Because the one thing you don't have with alcohol that you have with most of the other drug problems is the legal issue, because alcohol is legal. Underage drinking, yeah, but basically you get a slap on the hands for that. So, again, the number one thing to look for with anybody developing a substance abuse problem is erratic behavior. Behavior that is not what you expect from that individual. What this observed behavior, reasonable suspicion testing are observations that you make on a client that require no special training, and they basically focus on erratic behavior. If their appearance, if somebody that usually kept their appearance up pretty good, pretty soon you see their appearance start to slide. Behavior, confusion, outbursts of anger that are atypical for that individual. Slurred speech, people who are getting confused, doing minor tasks and just have periods of confusion. This is frequent with some of the other drugs that I'm going to talk about more than it is with alcohol, but it does happen. And let me tell you with this, anybody can fill one of these out. It requires no special training. It's just observed behavior, and it focuses on behavior that is atypical for that patient or that client. You fill one of these out. If possible, get another supervisor to come over and see if they see the same thing and have them sign the form too. Then you kick it up to HR or to whoever, and it's up to them to get the individual in to get them evaluated and see what the hell's going on. Again, you are not required to diagnose a problem, okay? You're simply expected to report erratic, unusual behavior that is atypical for that patient, okay? And let me tell you something. The worst thing that can happen with somebody that's developing a substance abuse problem is for people around them to ignore it. Because if somebody's developing a problem, it's not going to get better by itself, okay? If they could control it and make it better, they would have done it before you noticed what was going on. So you're not doing anybody a favor by overlooking and thinking, well, I'll let it go this time, next time will be different. So, you know, and that comes real hard. This is one of the things that I hit on when I do drug-free workplace training for business. You know, because in a rural area like this with small businesses, many times you're supervising somebody that you grew up with, somebody that you went to school with, hell, sometimes a relative. And there's always that tendency to think, well, I don't want to get them into trouble, so I'll let it go this time. And this is the biggest mistake that's made with people who are developing a substance abuse problem, because it will get worse, you know. I haven't yet, in all the time I've been in this business, to see somebody who got to a certain level with a problem and just it leveled out and stayed, never got any worse. It may take 2 or 3 years for it to get worse, but it will. So this is the best tool you have. And if it's used properly, it can make all the difference between a program being successful and it not being successful. If you'll all you should have all picked up a copy of this Popularity of Drugs. Okay. Let me start out by saying there is not one drug on this list that I couldn't go out and buy off the streets here in Burlington in a half an hour's time, okay? These drugs are all available, and they're all around us. Some of the things with drugs other than alcohol that we need to understand, drugs fall into about 3 categories: depressants, or downers, stimulants, or uppers, hallucinogens, and the question mark is for the synthetic drugs that are out there. The bath salts, the K2, the Molly, the Shaw, the Crocodile, and who the hell knows what flavor of the week is next. So let's start out with marijuana. There is probably no drug on this list that there's more controversy over than marijuana. It first popped up in this country in the late 1800s, and it came to the United States with the indentured workers coming from the Caribbean countries. Marijuana has a biphasic effect. 85% of the people that smoke marijuana will get kicked back and relax and feel great. About 12 to 15% of the people that smoke marijuana will get paranoid. Paranoid people are not fun people to be around because they misinterpret what's going on around them. Somebody that's extremely paranoid, you may put your hand out, shake their hand, and they may think you're pointing a gun at them and react appropriately. The other thing that we deal with now that we didn't have to deal with much back in the 60s and 70s is the fact that when you're talking about street drugs, there is no quality control, okay? You don't know what you're getting. Chances are the person you're buying it from doesn't know what they've got. The only way you can guarantee that you're getting 100% pure marijuana these days is if you grow it yourself, okay? Also, the marijuana today, back in the 60s, the marijuana back in the flower child days was 6 to 7% THC. There's stuff out there on the streets right now that's 19, 20, 21% THC. So it's much more potent than it used to be. Marijuana, more people failed drug tests over marijuana than any other drug because it hangs around in your system forever. You go out today and you smoke one joint of mediocre marijuana, you will probably test positive for THC for up to 30 days. If you're a regular user and you're smoking some of the better quality stuff, you may test positive 45 to 60 days after your last use. That's why, you know, I get people all the time that are sent by the courts for evaluation, and 90% of them are marijuana smokers. So, marijuana, biggest danger is the tar content. The tar content in a marijuana cigarette is anywhere from 9 to 12% greater than in a regular cigarette. So you do have the increased risk of respiratory diseases and lung cancer for heavy marijuana smokers. You don't see many people physically addicted to marijuana. That's not because they're not out there, but because it comes out of the system so slowly, you're not going to have any of the dramatic withdrawal symptoms that you see with alcohol and with some of the other drugs. Clients that I have had that I felt were having marijuana withdrawal, basically what you notice is irritability, but it rarely goes any farther than that. Now again, remember what I said about no quality control, and but marijuana is a part of our society. I think the latest statistics I saw from BHS was they felt that somewhere between 60 and 65% of seniors had smoked marijuana or tried marijuana at least once. A scarier fact would be how many in the middle school and grade schools have tried it. How many of you have heard of a farm party, PHARM? The PHARM stands for pharmacy. And this is big right now with the 12, 13, and 14-year-olds, okay? You go and you raid mom and dad's medicine cabinet and you grab a handful of what's ever there and put it in your pocket. You go to a party and everybody brings what they put in a bowl in the middle of the table and you mix it up and you reach in and take a couple. There's everything in there from birth control pills to heavy-duty narcotics. There's medication in there that by itself is not harmful at all, but in combination with another drug can be deadly. We get probably an average of, I would guess, 1 or 2 kids every 2 or 3 months in the emergency room that have been to one of these parties and are overdosed on something. These are the 12, 13, and 14-year-olds. Guess what they're going to be doing when they're 17, 18, and 19? You know. I'll tell you right now, I'm very disappointed in our educational system. I think we spend a lot of time teaching kids things that they'll never use the rest of their life and don't spend near enough time teaching them things they'll need every day. And one of the things that needs a lot of attention is not only drug education, but things like self-esteem building, values clarification, decision making. What's the most important thing when you're 12, 13, 14 years old?
Being accepted.
Yeah, being accepted, fitting in. And you got your pretty people, and you got your brains, and you got your jocks, and you got your musicians, and you got the farm boys. And then you have a whole bunch of kids that don't fit in anywhere. And what's the one group that'll accept anybody? The dopers. You could have 3 heads and be green, and if you're holding, you're one of us. And this is how a lot of kids get started in this. You know, this is how a lot of your clients get started into the drugs. Just struggling to fit in on a social sense, you know. So, benzodiazepines. These are your tranquilizers, your Valium, your Xanax, your Ativan, and all their generic counterparts. This is the most widely prescribed group of drugs in the United States today. There are more legal prescriptions written for benzodiazepines than any other class of drugs. Up until about 4 years ago, it used to be antibiotics, but the benzos passed them. They are very, very effective drugs. They're anti-anxiety drugs. You go to work today and find out the company you've worked for 30 years is closing its doors next week. One of the kids gets in trouble. You find out that somebody in the family's got a severe illness. You're upset, you're anxious, you can't sleep. You go to the doc and you say, hey, I need something to help me relax and get some sleep. He prescribes the one of the benzos. You go home, you take it like prescribed for a couple of 3 weeks, you get a handle of what's going on, and most people don't finish the first prescription. But there are people that will abuse anything, and particularly with prescription drugs. You know what the mentality in this country is? If one makes me feel better, two will put me on top of the world, and if I take three, I won't have a care about anything. And that's how people abuse prescription medication, okay? I mean, hell, I've done it, you know. The benzos, you don't find too many people abusing them on purpose, okay? What you do is you find people taking more than were prescribed and starting to develop a dependency on. You also see the benzos used a great deal for people that are into the stimulant drugs when they're coming down off a coke run or a meth run to help them level out and help them relax. But again, these are the most widely prescribed group of drugs in this country today, and they are effective. They do exactly what they're supposed to do. But they do get abused. And they do show up with people developing problems with them. So, then you come to cocaine. Cocaine's the drug that's too good to try. Cocaine is a stimulant drug. It was originally developed in the Andes Mountains in South America to give the workers in the coffee fields and the other crops fields up there to help them deal with the high altitude and to increase their heart rate and their breathing. Cocaine is the drug that's too good to try. I've had many clients over the years that have used cocaine on and off for 15 and 20 years, and they all tell me the same thing. Enjoy your first high on coke, because no matter how much you do after that, you'll never get that first high. You'll never get there. You do not see very many people physically dependent on cocaine. It's very, very rare. Because in order to keep cocaine in your system 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for a long enough period of time for the body to adjust, you're probably either going to stroke out or blow your heart first. There's a lot of coke around. There has been for the last 15, 20 years. So you don't see, with people, if you want to see somebody, you want to look for something with somebody that's on a stimulant drug, whether it's meth or coke or one of the other stimulant drugs, look for somebody that has a very short attention span and will have 6 or 7 projects going at the same time and not a damn one completed. They're like a fart in a skillet, you know. They've got all these things going, but they can't keep their attention on any one long enough to finish it. You know. This is what you see in the workplace with people that are doing coke. This is the person that's wandering around. They're leaving their workstation. They're over here talking to Joe. They're over here talking to Susie. They're over here talking to the foreman. They're every place but at their own workstation getting anything done. So, cocaine doesn't have a lot of side effects other than increased heart rate, and it will drive your blood pressure up. Again, like I said, you don't see that many people physically dependent on cocaine to do any long-term damage. Okay? Most of it's the attention. They're not sticking to any project. They're not completing anything. So, then we come to meth. The poor man's cocaine. Methamphetamine is a stimulant drug. Methamphetamine was developed in the mid-1930s in Nazi Germany to give to the German troops so they could march day or night. At the time he committed suicide, Adolf Hitler was a methamphetamine addict and was injected up to 4 times a day with pure methamphetamine. If any of you are World War II history buffs and have ever watched any of the news clippings of Hitler's speeches that rambled on for 2 and 3 hours and didn't say anything, that's meth talking. You do not get the high with meth that you get with cocaine, but it does last longer. That's something I forgot to mention with coke. A high with cocaine, you snort some cocaine, you fire some cocaine, and the high will last anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes, and then it's done. And when you go up with cocaine, when it wears off, you don't come back to ground zero, you go to the bargain basement. Meth, you don't get quite as high as you do with coke, but it lasts longer. Meth, if you snort some meth, fire some meth, depending on how good a quality is, it will last up to 12 to 16, 18 hours. So, what do you see with people that are on methamphetamine? The same things you see with coke or with any of the other stimulant drugs. Very short attention span, all over the place. 15, 16 projects going and not a one completed. You do tend to see more paranoia with people that are into meth. People that are misinterpreting what's going on around them, becoming very suspicious of everything. Meth, they used to have a saying that you could get everything you need to make meth at Walmart. Well, you could, and you still can. But now, to get the pseudoephedrine that you need, you have to go to the pharmacy counter and show a picture ID and stand around for 20 minutes while they plug it into a national database to see when's the last time you bought some. So, meth, when meth started to regain popularity, you didn't hear much about meth after World War II. And then it started to pop up in the 70s out in California. The biker gangs were putting it out. And at that time, the catalyst that you needed for the chemical reaction to make meth was red phosphorus. Red phosphorus is a very volatile chemical. They used it in napalm, okay? In 1983, some enterprising chemist learned that instead of using red phosphorus as a catalyst, you could use anhydrous ammonia. And guess where you find a lot of anhydrous ammonia? And that's when meth really broke open in the Midwest. It was about 1983 or 1984. Any of you ever seen a farmer's hands that has a hose break when he's putting anhydrous on? It freezes the skin on contact. And then when it thaws out, the skin flakes off. You know, so this is not the safest chemical in the world. And how many of you have heard of the shake and bake method? That's where you put all the ingredients to make meth, including the anhydrous, in a giant Coke bottle, and then you shake. You put the top on and you shake it to get them mixed up. But what do you look for again with meth is pretty much the same thing as with coke or any stimulant drug. Short attention span, talking 90 miles an hour, not able to finish one task before they're off on 2 or 3 others, you know. Paranoia. You will see some paranoia with stimulant drug abusers. Usually it's fairly easy to pick up on somebody that's under the influence of either coke or meth, because like I said, they're all over the place, you know. So this is what you look for, and again, this is where this observed behavior form becomes very important. Then we go to the opioids and the opiates. This is one of the fastest growing drug problems in the country today. These are your pain medications. The opiates are heroin, morphine, codeine, and opium, and they all come from the opium poppy. The opioids are your synthetic pain medications, your OxyContin, your hydrocodone, your Vicodin, your Percodan, your Percocet. These are a very, very important part of medicine. You cannot practice medicine without these drugs. You know, if somebody's going to slice your abdomen open, take your appendix out, you better damn well hope they give you one of these opiates or opioids. These are also the fastest group of drugs on this list to develop a physical dependency to. If anybody in this room was put on an opioid or an opiate for the next 30 days, at the end of 30 days, your tolerance would be up a little. That means that it would take a little more to do what less used to when you started. This is the first step towards physical dependency with any drug, okay? This has become a particular problem in the United States in the last 8 to 9 years. And not because people are necessarily abusing the drugs, but you have people that have chronic pain, fibromyalgia, some types of back problems that can't be treated with either physical therapy or therapy, you know. People who have legitimate chronic pain, and they have to have pain medication. And the doctor is faced with the dilemma. Do I treat this person's pain and turn them into an addict? Or do I use something that's less effective and let them hurt a little bit? That's why you've seen in the last 5 or 6 years pain clinics springing up all over the place. We have 2 here in Burlington. We have Dr. Jewell out in West Burlington, and then we have Dr. Dooley, who comes down from Davenport 2 days a week and operates out of the old Oak Street School. These are anesthesiologists. These are people who specialize with pain. And they work with patients that have chronic pain to walk that thin line between treating their pain and not developing a debilitating addiction. And it is a very difficult process. Now, on the other hand, you also have people that abuse these drugs, like everything else. And again, get back to the quality control issue. How many of you ever heard of fentanyl? Fentanyl is an extremely potent pain medication. It's anywhere from 150 times to 200 times stronger than morphine, okay? It used to be, up until about 3 years ago, you didn't hear of fentanyl anywhere but operating rooms. But the last 2 or 3 years, it's been out on the streets. And you have people that are showing up in the emergency rooms overdosed on opiates because they have no idea of how strong fentanyl is. A year ago in January, they had 6 people die in one weekend in Des Moines of fentanyl heroin overdoses. And they traced it back and found that they'd all bought their crap from the same person. You know, again, you're back to the quality control issue. There is no quality control. And it poses a problem with the opiates and the opioids because, like I said, they're an essential part of medicine. You have to have pain medication. But again, they're the quickest. You can develop a physical dependency on the opioids or the opiates faster than any other class of drugs. And it's a big problem in the medical community right now. People take them because when you get high on the opioids and the opiates, you kind of just zone out. You know, you just kind of float off into nowhere. When I worked in Chicago for a while, my office was down at Adams and Des Plaines, right on the expressway. And across the expressway on North Halsted was Junkie Row at the time. It was a bunch of old abandoned buildings and everything, and it's where the street junkies went when they scored to shoot up. And you'd go in there and you'd see people that were high on heroin. Some of them didn't even get the needle out of their arm before they'd nod off, and that's what they'd do, nod off and stare at the ceiling for 3-4 hours, and then it'd wear off and it was time to go score some more. You know, That's not particularly my idea of fun, but for some people, you know. One of the hardest things to do in the medical profession is to evaluate pain, okay? Because pain is such an individual thing. People have different tolerances for pain. Some people can stand ungodly amounts of pain and get by. Other people scratch a pinky and think they're dying, you know. So you also have psychological pain. People who have a lot of psychological pain for any one of 100 reasons, okay? And people look to escape pain, you know. By definition, pain is uncomfortable. We don't like it, you know. And some people will do whatever they have to escape the pain. And, you know, those are the ones that shoot up and zone out. The opiates, you do not die from opiate withdrawal. You will cramp, you will ache, your nose will run, your eyes will water. You may wish you could die, but you're not gonna, okay? Withdrawal from opiates is not gonna kill you, okay? So, but it's a problem, and it's becoming a growing problem. It's probably one of the fastest growing drug problems in this country in the last 4 or 5 years. You know, OxyContin. OxyContin was a miracle drug when it came on the scene back in 2002 because it was a potent pain medication, but it was time released. Prior to OxyContin coming on the scene, if you had pain and you got a shot of a painkiller, you got the full effect within a couple of minutes, okay? OxyContin fed into the system slowly over a period of time. And it was considered a miracle drug in the pain community when it came on the scene. But it rapidly became used and abused. OxyContin, one 80 milligram pill of OxyContin has gone for as much as $120 here in Burlington. The lowest I've ever seen it is $80 for one pill, you know. And if you have a problem, if you're addicted to it and have to have 2 or 3 80 milligram pills a day, how are you going to support it? You're going to do whatever you have to do. And if that means robbing somebody, you know, this is what people do. There's been a lot of Oxy around Burlington. It's been a big problem the last couple of years. So, but again, please keep in mind that the opiates and the opioids are an essential part of medicine, you know. You cannot practice good medicine without these. Then we come to the synthetic drugs, the bath salts, the K2, the Sha, the crocodile. Crocodile is supposed to be the one that came over from Russia that eats holes in your skin. Well, it didn't come from Russia, it came from Mexico. But it does eat little craters in your skin like an infected mosquito bite or something. These are drugs that nobody knows what's in them because they didn't exist before they hit the streets. So they're legal when they first come out. When bath salts and K2 first came on the scene about 7 or 8 years ago, you could buy them down at Nature's Seasoning on Jefferson Street. So they were made illegal in 2012. But the people that make this crap change 1 or 2 molecules, give it a different name, put it back out on the streets, and you know, wait for the feds to catch up and make them illegal. These drugs have no quality control whatsoever. They have no medicinal value whatsoever. They make people crazy, okay? They were put out on the scene as, bath salts were first put out as being the same thing as meth, but they were legal. K2 was put out as being the same thing as marijuana, but it was legal. Well, they were half right with both of them. When they first came on the scene, they were legal because nobody had ever heard of them. But they were not, bath salts were not the same thing as meth. Bath salt, K2 was not the same thing as marijuana. Again, these drugs have no quality control whatsoever. You don't know what's in them. You don't know how you're going to react to it. You know, I have as yet to have a client that had a good trip on bath salts. You know, some of them said it wasn't that bad, but I have as yet to have a client that says they enjoyed it. So you ask them why they do it. Well, it was around, you know. So the synthetic drugs are still out there. Again, they keep popping up. They're dangerous. They're real dangerous. So, you know, you have a lot of people out there that walk a thin line between being able to function fairly normally and getting by. You give some of these people something like bath salts, and it kicks them over the edge, and some of them don't come back, you know. You don't have any trouble telling if somebody's using the synthetic drugs. You won't have any trouble at all. Then we come to the date rape drugs. This is your roofies, or rohypnol. There's a couple others. These are not a big problem. You don't see them much around here where you see them. Y'all know what a rave is. It's big around the college towns where you go and rent a big old barn of a building and put a bunch of colored strobe lights in there and pipe in music 10 decibels above loud and sell bottled water for $5 or $8 a bottle. And kids get in there and get high and dance till they can't dance anymore. This is where you see the date rape drugs. Nobody takes the date rape drugs voluntarily. They're used exactly for what the name says, to slip into a member of the opposite sex's drink or their food when they're not looking, so they'll be real compliant and you can do whatever you want with them. They're not a big problem. Like I said, nobody takes them voluntarily. You don't get a high from them. You know, what you get is you get just kind of zoned out. So. And finally, we come to the hallucinogens. This is your mescaline, your peyote, your LSD, your magic mushrooms. These are drugs that create hallucinations. LSD was an interesting drug. I worked in an LSD research laboratory for a year and a half back in 1964 and 65 up at the university. The study never got completed because the feds panicked because of all the horror stories they were hearing about LSD and pulled LSD off the market. So the study was never completed. What we did get far enough into the study to determine was that LSD caused changes in brain waves. We were running EEG machines, so. But you don't hear much about acid anymore. It'll pop up every once in a while in university towns, but it's not a big thing. Nobody ever gets addicted to acid, you know. 80% of the people that took an acid trip saw the pretty colors and heard the good sounds and had a good trip, but about 20% had bad trips and got real paranoid. Again, you were talking about people whose grasp on sanity was a little questionable anyway, and you give them a hallucinogen and it's going to push them over the edge, and some don't get back. So. Again, the number one symptom you look for in any drug, including alcohol, is erratic, unusual behavior. Behavior that is different from what you would expect from that individual. Okay? The clients that you work with are at particular risk for just about every drug on this list. because sometimes when they decide to use them, they don't use any discretion in how much they use. They get panicked when they feel different. You know, it's a big risk. But like I said, there isn't a drug on this list you couldn't buy in Burlington in half an hour. So, again, drugs are here to stay. I don't see them going away. The war on drugs has been the biggest flop. We've had some major governmental flops in my lifetime, but none as big as the war on drugs. Right now, the big panic with the government is over the opioids and the opiates, and they're having all kinds of meetings and all kinds of committees to deal with the opioid and the opiate problem. I don't see it happening. Young people today are very drug-oriented, you know. They look at drugs the way we looked at alcohol back when I was a kid in the dark ages. You know, they've grown up with it. You know, I have one video that I use with my clients, and it talks about a guy that was an educator that had a sixth grade student that his big dream was to be 16 so he could smoke marijuana like his brother. You know, this is what's out there, and the clients you work with, you know, have access to all this stuff too. You know, so I'd like to tell you I'd see it changing, but I don't. You know. And the government is not doing, and the third-party reimbursers are not doing a whole lot to help, because the funding to pay for substance abuse treatment is getting tighter all the time, as it is with all mental health treatment. You know, it's not a pretty picture. You're going to encounter it. If you can really learn to use one of these, you know, you may be able to cut off some problems before they get out of control. And that the earlier you get somebody with a substance abuse problem into some kind of counseling or treatment, the better chance you have of it being successful.
All right, two big changes. The first one is when interviewing a prospective employee who is a safety-sensitive employee. That is every single position here, except maybe an admin position. But otherwise, every single position here is a safety-sensitive position. What you need to ask them is, and you can read for yourself, but have you ever tested positive or refused to test for a pre-employment drug or alcohol test in the last 2 years? You have to ask them that question. If they say yes, you say, okay, thank you. And you can leave it at that. Then, if they are the employee that you choose, that you have selected as the employee that you want to hire, you need to let Jennifer, Casey, or myself know. Because then we have a questionnaire that we have to fill out and send to the previous employer. That prospective employee had to have gone through a substance abuse professional, someone like Jim, and been treated and graduated successfully from that program. Okay? So the big thing you guys need to know is ask the question. If you get a yes, and that's the person you need to ask or want to hire, then it comes to Jen, Casey, and I, because we've got to do a questionnaire and it will be contingent upon them being hired. If they tested positive and they decided just to quit and not to go through with the substance abuse testing, or classes, we can't hire them. And it's in the last 2 years. That's the other change, is we used to tell employees who decided not to go through the training and not to go through the SAP program, Substance Abuse Professional Program, we would tell them, come back in a year. It's now 2. Now 2 years. So If we have an employee and we get about 75, 25, maybe 80, 20, 80% say, I don't want to go through any kind of program, I just quit. 20% have gone through a program and has successfully stayed with Hope Haven. The 80% who quit, they can't even come back to our doorstep for 2 years. Okay. Okay, the biggest change is our post-accident. So go to number 4 on my sheet. What we have in our current policy is if you are in an accident with either your own car or a client car, or not a client car, excuse me, an agency car, and the damage was more than $1,000, you need to go be drug tested. FTA said, no, that's not true. So here's their rules, okay? I'll go through this on the Word document real quick, and then we'll look at the sheet that they give us. Any accident that has a fatality, right away the driver needs to be tested. If there's a bodily injury in the car or van or whatever you're driving and the person is treated medically away from the accident, driver must be tested. If the vehicle sustained, here's the big word, disabling damage, this does not include flat tire. The answer is yes, you must be drug tested. So, if you run into something and the steering, you can no longer steer the car, or you no longer have brakes, automatic, that is a disabling damage to the vehicle and you must be drug tested. Flat tire does not count. If there's a FTA post-accident drug and alcohol testing decision form, this thing is cool. I like this a lot. It's really easy to use. I printed 80 of them. Here's what I need you to do. Keep one for yourself. You probably want to take one home because anybody who's on call is going to have to refer to this. Then anybody who has a vehicle of any kind at your home or at your site, take enough to put in that vehicle. All right? Here's how it works. On the very top, it's just the date of accident. The driver fills this out. Date of accident, time of accident, employee name. Then it just goes through a decision process. Is there a fatality? Yep. Get drug tested. No fatality. Move down the form. Is there a bodily injury that required immediate medical treatment away from the accident? If yes, drug testing. If no, you're good to go. If you go to the hospital or a client goes to the hospital a day later, too late. No drug testing. This is immediate medical care away from the scene. If they're treated at the scene and it's a cut and a scrape and a bump and a bruise, you're good to go. Okay? Next. So now keep moving down. This is when we get into disabling damage. Yes, drug testing. No, good to go. So flat tire, good to go. Okay? Keep going down. Actions of driver or any other covered employee of the vehicle have contributed to the accident. So, you are driving along and another person in the passenger side reaches over and grabs the steering wheel and pulls on the steering wheel. Okay? If that has happened, the person who is doing those actions, pulled on the steering wheel or who's actually caused the accident, needs to be drug tested. That's pretty simple, makes a lot of sense. Then the next one, I just do not see this one happen. This is if the dispatcher, which we don't have one, or the mechanic, which in our case is Bruce, screws up and they don't do something right, then they have to be drug tested. So Bruce, I'll let you know if you have to go be drug tested. But if your lug nuts are all tightened up, I think you're good. So that one's not very common. All right, alcohol drug testing needs to be done within 2 hours of the accident. If you don't do it within 8 hours, don't even bother. Alcohol's gone. Okay? Drug testing needs to be done within 32 hours of the accident. We always say, do it immediately. Do it immediately. Okay? The next page then goes through what a disabling damage is. Then it tells you where you're going to go get tested. Then the next thing is if alcohol wasn't done, so in other words, if we didn't get the alcohol done within 2 hours, why not? And if you didn't get the alcohol done within 8 hours, so it was never done, why not? Next one is if a drug test wasn't done, why not? And the last part is if you can say, and this will very rarely happen, but if you can say, because we had one and we still got dinged on it, discounted, the driver is discounted as a contributing factor to the accident and therefore no FTA post-accident testing was contributed. So, we had a driver heading down 218, another person totally T-boned them. Wasn't our driver's fault, they did nothing wrong. Everybody, thank goodness, was okay, our van was totaled. The person who was driving the other car got a ticket, 100% responsible. We did not drug test our driver. No fault, right? FTA came in and said, could have she switched lanes? Could have she done this? Could have she done this? So here, we were positive that she was at no fault, and she was at no fault. We should have tested her, and we got dinged on it. Okay, so it will almost never happen that you're gonna, I can't think of a clearer case than that one. And they said that wasn't enough not to drug test. The routing for this is on your sheet. The routing is, first of all, the employee fills it out, then it goes to the supervisor. The supervisor then fills out their portion, then it comes over to admin to Jen or I. Alcohol drug testing during the day, call Jen, myself, or Casey. They'll go to Business Health. Alcohol drug testing after hours, go to Great River Emergency Room. They have to call someone in. They don't even have someone on staff that can do it. They have to call someone in, all right? So again, during the day, call Jen, myself. Can't get a hold of us, call Casey. We'll make an appointment at Business Health. After hours, they go to Great River Medical Center Emergency Room, all right? That is the biggest change. So once again, everybody who has a call situation, I would take one of these forms home so that when they call you panicked, you can walk through it with them. I would put one of these in every single car, made 80 copies of them, they're in the back. And then I would always keep one of these with you as you're running around, like Eva, I'd always keep one with you because the first thing they're gonna do is they're gonna call you and say, what do I do, what do I do? And then you can walk it through with them. We have sent quite a few clients for testing, use this exact same form for reasonable suspicion for a client. Now here's the difference. The ones that we need to send to drug testing are the clients who are on the clock for Hope Haven. The ones that are not on the clock for Hope Haven, you guys can deal with your case manager, with your supervisor. The ones that I have to worry about are the ones on the clock, supported employment. All right, if they're Amanda's client and they're not working and they're not on the clock, she can work with the case manager and her director as to what to do.
So that's only for clients, not for staff?
No, this is for everybody.
Okay.
Everybody. And it's mainly used for staff, but we've had some incidents where clients have been on the clock working, and then we fill this out too. No, this is the form you want to use for any time you suspect somebody.